Hello, everyone. It is time again for another edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis here on September 3rd. I'm Brian Walton, and this is my partner, Kyle Reis. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you for having me, Brian. How are you tonight?
Doing great, doing great. As usual, we are brought to you in audio form each week at the Scoop Sports Network and all your favorite podcast apps, and in video form here at thecardinalnation.com. So please remember to check us out each week, or you can go back and check out some of our back issues as well. Certainly the ones where we had Kareem Hawk on talking about the Cardinals draft picks have been very popular and very enlightening. I know not only for all of you maybe, but for Kyle and I as well. So we're going to start off with just a quick look at the calendar. It is now past Labor Day, which used to be the traditional time when the minor league seasons end, and we are now into the last week of the season for the Class A teams, Palm Beach and Peoria. And interestingly enough, Peoria is out of it, although they had a six-game sweep last week, so it's nice to see them playing well here near the end of the year. Palm Beach still has a mathematical chance of making the playoffs. They're actually behind by 12 and a half games in the standings in the second half, but the first half team, the St. Lucie Mets, also won in the first half. So they won the first half, and then now they're leading in the second half. And instead of giving them a bye in the first round, which is what I think they deserve, the way that they do this is then they give the second place team in the second half the playoff spot. And right now, Palm Beach is fighting Daytona for that spot, and Palm Beach would have to win at least 5 out of 6 to get in. So odds are low, but certainly Springfield is in good shape. They're just a win away from setting a franchise record, and they won the first half, and they could win the second half as well. Memphis and Peoria will go home, although Memphis, will continue to play for at least 3 more weeks because they're mirroring the major league schedule. So that's kind of what's happening around the system. One of the things that happened on Monday, of course, was September 1st, the call-ups. And as the folks who were waiting for JJ, until the last minute, you just weren't paying attention, not to us, but to what John Mozeliak said. That wasn't going to happen. And the two additions that happened were Victor Scott coming off the injured list and Chris Roycroft, who's been up so many times this season I can't count already. But there were a couple of interesting call-ups a couple of days before, and that was due to the injuries to Alec Burleson and Joel Pozo, and that is Jimmy Crooks and Cesar Prieto were called up for the first time, added to the 40-man and then called up. And both those guys needed to be added to 40-man this fall anyway. Were you surprised at all to see those moves, Kyle?
Had I known that Pozo had a concussion, I would not have been as surprised as I was. But I will say that I was surprised to see Jimmy Crooks get the call, and also the reporting since has been, had this not happened with Pozo, that it would have been Crooks come September 1st anyway. So that is encouraging. That's a positive. That's something I've been clamoring for that I did not think we would even get to see. So I'm pro that. And of course, John Denton wrote about Cesar Prieto. Everybody knows his story, his escape from, not escape from Cuba, but seeking asylum away from Cuba in order to play professional baseball and getting a chance to do it at the major league level as a 26-year-old making his major league debut from the Orioles organization, traded for Jack Flaherty in the Jack Flaherty trade in 2022. So I will say that obviously I do not care about Chris Roycroft in any capacity. I do not. Yeah, I'm giving
Sorry,
him the Ryan.
Roycroft family, if you're watching tonight, sorry.
I was just about ready to say I'm giving him the whole Ryan Ludus treatment right now. I'm sorry about that
Yeah,
to
yeah,
the
yeah.
Ludus family again. I'm sorry for assaulting your son early on, but and of course Victor Scott. It's nice to have. There's a lot of versatility there. Another. We're back in the same position we were for the majority of the 2024 season with Victor Scott, where he's a redundancy with another left-handed swinging outfielder who is more of a contact guy and probably a better like all-around defensive center fielder from just a certainty standpoint. So it's nice to have them both back, but it's other than Jimmy Crooks, it's just more of the same kind of boring thing, Brian. And no disrespect to Cesar Prieto.
Yeah, and Jimmy Crooks, it looks like Crooks is going to play part-time. He's, of course, starting with Miles Michaelis, but maybe they're trying to find something to make Michaelis work. But Crooks is going to play part-time with Pages here down the stretch, which is great. So, maybe we'll get to see him in 14, 15 games, something like that the rest of the year, and see. They need to understand whether this guy's going to be in the picture or he's going to be a trade trade bait as they try to shake out the catching position in the offseason. Prieto, I mean, basically, you got another infielder, second base, third base on a roster full of them. I guess maybe he might play ahead of Jose Fermin, who we don't see very often either. Right now, those are kind of the back guys on the bench, I suspect. And Burleson is supposed to be back relatively soon. His injury isn't super severe. I wouldn't be surprised to see Prieto go right back to Memphis.
Yeah, I do think that there needs to probably be a little bit more intense of a conversation about Pedro Pajes and his future. I think that there's a lot of reason to be excited or at least respect what Pedro Pajes has done, especially coming off of August where he was gangbusters at the plate.
He was one of the Cardinals' best hitters, if not the best hitter over the month of August, which is, on one hand, that's very positive for Pedro. On the other hand, it's very damning for the rest of the lineup.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's Brian. That's exactly the direction I was going in. I think it's just to take the rest of the lineup out of it because you hit that point so well. He has turned himself through the best month of his professional career. He'll never have a month that good ever again into what is an accumulating statistic version of a starter. Like people could say, oh, it's a starting catcher. Look at his 80 WRC plus, and he also plays good D, and that is technically correct. But I would just remind everybody that it took this August to get him to that point. Again, I will spend if there's a Vegas booth somewhere that I can go and I can put $100 down that he will never have a month of August like he had in his career. I'm doing it all day, and that's no disrespect to Pedro. He's not a starting quarterback, a starting catcher.
He's not a starting quarterback either.
He might be. Maybe that's what he's better suited
Hey,
for.
hey, have you seen his physique? Maybe you need to look again.
Yeah, what was it? It was it Lorenzen, the big burly quarterback from Kentucky all those years ago. But anyways, yeah, he he's perfectly cast in a timeshare backup catcher role. So they need to stick with this plan that they're preaching that they're going to split time Crooks and Pajes. Otherwise, this is another waste and something that the Cardinals have a history of doing.
All right then. So I thought you were going to say sell high, but you're saying hold, but hopefully see Crooks become the primary starter next year, maybe.
No, I love Brian. So if you want to go down this angle, I am. If there's another team out there that views him as a starting catcher on a
Sell,
championship,
sell, sell, sell.
yeah, like I don't know who's making that decision, but if you're
I doubt anybody is, but I guess you never know.
hey, look, I've seen plenty of people who write for other sites and who are very intelligent say that Pedro Paez should be a starter because of his WRC plus and because of his good defense, which has regressed a little bit, and also because the illusion was about how well he handled a pitching staff, which he does a really good job, but it doesn't matter when your pitchers are kind of trash. So that's all to say. If he is, if somebody will pay him, will pay you, trade for him as if he's a starter, then yeah, if you don't do it, you're dumb.
All right. So another move that happened in addition to the September calls, which I thought was mildly interesting, John Gazdar, who was an 11th rounder a couple years ago, moved up from Peoria to Springfield and is hitting very well early on in Double A. Is Gazdar a guy that we need to start paying attention to in terms of the back end of the prospect rankings?
I think so. He's fun. I'm always a little worried about a prospect who can't hit for power, and he's not going to hit for power. He'll run into some doubles here and there. But I do think that if you're talking about top 50 prospect lists that you and I do, and I do think that he would be at the back. Look, he's a doubles machine. He's a contact machine. He takes good at bats. He's pretty solid in the field. I don't know, like he's probably a shortstop. Might not be a shortstop, but is probably a shortstop. But he can play second and probably play third. So it's worth keeping an eye on him in the fact that this is a really good depth. All of these years we've kind of kept an eye on Jeremy Rivas, and that's kind of gone now at this point. I think we understand a little bit more of that roller coaster ride, just like the hand signal you were making, Brian, with Jeremy Rivas. Like maybe John Gazdar can reach that high average, little bit of pop, really good defensive shortstop that turns out to be organizational depth, maybe the 40th man on 40 man that the Cardinals could need, unless he can learn to run into some power. And then we're talking about maybe a little bit more.
So draft activations. One more came this last week. Trevor Haskins, a 15th round shortstop. We haven't seen Liam yet, and we may not because there's only, like I said, a handful of games left for Palm Beach. But Haskins, have you seen him at all play? What you have any feeling about him, Trevor Haskins?
Brian, before we went live here on Tuesday night, I watched Leonel Seguera uh, try to field a ground ball as a pitcher. It was a hard hit ball, and it shanked off of him. And Trevor Haskins was playing second, and he made a really great athletic play and throw to get the runner out at first off of Leonel. So I will say
Example of
that
one. So far, so good.
so far so good. I will say that when we talked about it with Kareem, what interests me about him is he never really got a chance with Stanford until his junior year, until the 2025 season. Really, it was a little, a little. I guess he did in 2024, but his 2025 season is really when he started getting regular playing time. And there's a weird amount of pop. He makes a great amount of contact, and he swings just maybe too much. So if he can work on his swing decisions, and this might be a little something more. It might be, again, we're talking about John Gazdar with some inherent pop.
Mhm.
So we'll see where it goes. It's a shame. It's a shame that we're getting towards the end of the year, but it's nice to see that these guys are getting a chance. Brian,
Yeah,
this
I
might
think
not be
all the
the,
position players now are active, with the exception of Franklin, or not Franklin, the high schooler Mitchell, who
yeah.
is not activated yet, but not that surprising because he's may not be ready for Palm Beach at this point.
But you did it, Ryan. It wasn't me this time. You Ryan Franklin is what you
Right.
were thinking. You
Yeah.
did it.
Ryan
That,
Franklin Mitchell.
Yes. Yeah, I do have a hot take. I don't know if this is something I've been thinking about a lot. And granted, it was a different regime, and it's not about any of the guys we've talked about so far. But I think back to 2018, Brian, and there was an 18-year-old catcher who was beating the world up at the plate, and he ended the year. I think it was a 3 game stint at Springfield after not, and I forgot how he had, for some reason I thought he was at Palm Beach, but at that point, it was a whole different thing. But in 2018, Ivan Herrera ended his year at Springfield as an 18-year-old. And I just want to go on the record as saying I would love to see Raniel Rodriguez in Springfield to end the year. I again, he doesn't. I think Herrera only started one of those 3 games, and it might have
What
been
what
more
the,
than
what the hell sent him to the Arizona Fall League?
that's Brian. So let's continue to build. I figured
Yeah.
we'd save that conversation for a different day, but absolutely, Brian, I'm with you.
All right. So as long as you're on it, we're going to switch you over to the topics here. Raniel Rodriguez, um, he's a player of the month for August, as far as I was concerned. Go to the Cardinal Nation, look at the data, look at the top guys who were contending for player of the month. But Rodriguez led the system in home runs, tied in extra base hits, led the system in RBI, 22 and 22 games, slugging, and OPS last month. And the guy that he beat out, among others, JJ Weatherholt, who was, topped him in average in OBP, but behind in slugging and OPS, still had an exceptional month. But Rodriguez did all those things I said while, walking at a 14% rate and only striking out at a 16% rate. Very, very impressive again for anybody, let alone a young man who 17 months ago was still an amateur. And now he's 18 years old, tearing it up in high A. Excuse me, low A.
Yeah, and all the things that we've been curious to keep an eye on, how he evolves, how he adapts. He's just doing everything as extremely well as you could ever ask for an 18-year-old to do. It comes with the caveat that usually when you're doing it this late in a minor league season, uh, especially after the draft, especially after the Dominican Summer League and the Complex League are ended, it ends up being a little bit muddled talent wise. There's a lot of ebb and flow on rosters at the lowest levels in the minor league. So, it's going to sound ridiculous to fans, but a lot of times you want to see him doing this in the middle part, of the season, the beginning of the season.
Well, in all
But
fairness, Reniel Rodriguez was the player of the month back in May. Now, he was a level lower in the Florida Complex League, but he's been doing this all year long.
exactly, Brian. That's it. Exactly. That was a point that I was just about ready to make. Yeah, it's just that he just keeps doing it, and he keeps getting better and better. It doesn't matter what level he's at. It doesn't matter what competition he's at. He's evolving. He's changing. He's hitting for power. He's hitting the ball in the air, and he's hitting the ball hard while continuing to refine and show progress behind the plate as a catcher. So, without compromising some of his what I would consider to be average to below, but sometimes average to slightly above athleticism that is in his body. So he's exciting, and I think that I've been quick to say that I don't necessarily think the Cardinals have a guy in the organization who's the guy, and that's more about probability than it is about like talent of the players and how tough the major leagues are. But if you wanted to say that this 18-year-old at Palm Beach that is hitting the ball historically well at that level as an 18-year-old could be that, then I can't make an argument against it other than to say, let's see how it looks in 2026.
There you have it. Probably the last young guy that we would have talked about if you and I were together at that point, like this, might have been Oscar Taveras. And I'm not necessarily drawing a comparison between the two, other than to say, this young, this much buzz about him.
Yeah. It was the only other one that comes to my mind is Magneuris Sierra, but they not on that level. Sierra was just he had such a high average, and everybody thought, and he had the speed, and he also had the defensive prowess, and everybody thought, oh, this guy might be the return to Whitey ball manifest in the biggest way, and maybe he can run into some homers here and there. When Tavares was just something so much more. So you're dead on, Brian.
Not to sell Weatherholt short. He had a tremendous month, like I said. But again, 20-year-old Daniel Ortiz finished his month as the Midwest League Player of the Week. He's only been at Peoria now for a little over a month, maybe 6 weeks. Hit 345 last month. Had a 345, 447, 517, 964 OPS. Tremendous month. Strikeouts are a little high, but this is another guy. I mean, a 16th rounder coming through like this is a tremendous find for the Cardinals.
Yeah, Brian, I feel like we were on Danielle Ortiz probably from the get-go. Maybe our list might not have reflected as such, but I think that we both had a feeling that this young man was going to do some pretty impressive things, and he does it a little different at each level as compared to like Rainiel Rodriguez. It takes him a little bit longer to adapt his game to the level, especially with the strikeout rate. But like when he was at Palm Beach, we saw that strikeout rate go down. It hasn't happened at Peoria yet exactly, but I would wager that if we had another month of runway, we'd see that strikeout rate start to go down. It takes him a while to settle in, but again, start of the year as a teenage prospect drafted in the 16th round who just runs into the baseball and does it in a really efficient and effective way. And again, not to keep with things we've talked about with him before in the past is his defense, his athleticism is probably, some people were saying it was a 30 grade or even a 40 grade. And I think it's at least a 40 grade athleticism, defensive profile, even at third. It's probably average at best, below average, but it's not so below average that you couldn't deal with it.
But they've also had him playing some first as well, so that's obviously the fallback for him.
Yes, sir.
Another thing that was interesting, I detailed the results of 8 finalists, guys who had an OPS over 850 last month. And 3 of the finalists, in addition to Rodriguez, the other 2 are catchers. And normally you would think the month of August, catchers are wearing down after a long season. But Crooks, batted 333 last month. So, I mean, he earned his promotion to St. Louis. And Ryan Campos at Peoria, guy hasn't really done much this year. Also had just under a 900 OPS. Again, very good walk strikeout rates. So, it's nice to see some of these other catchers in the system doing well as well.
Brian, every time Ryan Campos would be that one player that every time I decide to completely dismiss him, he ends up going on a tear. His stat line, his OPS will always be buoyed by his walk rate, more his walk rate than his slug. But hey, look, when you got a catcher who can get on base and swing from the left side, that's incredibly valuable. So another player at that level that kind of stood out this year was this month. I mean, the month of August was Juan Ben Cho. A
Yeah.
player that and I know that you did your thing, and it was surprising to me about how well he's really played since June 1st. It's more been since July 1st, but since June 1st, Juan Ben Cho has really started to turn it on at the plate.
Yeah, Cho missed my cutoff line. He had an 827 OPS for the month, but hit 5 home runs, drove in 17 for Peoria last month. Had a very, very nice month, 352 on base percentage. And it's nice to see because this is a guy that I think prospect fatigue has definitely set in, but Cho's still only 21 years old. He's only been playing in the U.S. now for this will be his, 3rd year.
Yeah.
So, it's not like Cho is 25 years old and stuck in high A. I mean, he's 21 years old at high A, and he's on a decent track now. If he can continue this nice play to close the season, he'll have something to build on for next year.
Yeah, that's got. I hope so. I hope so. Because a lot of these guys, a lot of players in the organization have seemed to take steps forward. It might have taken some of these guys a little time, but he's one of the kids who seems to be taking a step forward. He has kind of the same issues that I have with him, or some of the same that I have with Jesus Baez. There's just some airheadedness to the way he plays the game outside of what he does in the batter's box, and hopefully with a little maturity. And when I say maturity, I don't mean as a human being. I mean as a baseball player. I'm not talking about the person. I'm talking about the baseball player. But with a little baseball maturity, some of those boneheaded or absent-minded plays become more and more infrequent.
So a couple of the other guys on the list, Zach Levinson hit 6 home runs, moving up to Springfield. Um, Not a good walk rate. Strikeouts a little high, so that balance needs to be addressed. Joshua Baez, who continues to play very well. I think what impressed me the most about his month, he batted 293, and he had a low batting average for a lot of this year, but he also had a walk and strikeout count almost equal. So Baez seems to be figuring it out over the long haul at Springfield, which is a positive for the future. And then the other guy, Brian Torres, hits for average, gets on base, doesn't have any pop in the bat, 27 years old. Probably not a prospect, but a good role player, a good guy to have in your system, can play infield, can play outfield, can do a lot of things for you.
Yeah, another again, I love it. I love the way you do it. I know we talk about it every month, but I love the way that you highlight some of these players. From the top end of the prospect spectrum to maybe some of the guys who we won't see make their way out of Double A or might get a little taste of Triple A and never go anywhere. So I love it, Brian. Bravo.
All right, so let's talk about a couple of news items. One of them on Tuesday, hitting coach, St. Louis hitting coach Brant Brown and manager Ollie Marmol were on a radio show, and Brant Brown basically called out Jordan Walker and said that at some point he'll need to put more time and more effort into game preparation. When you hear that, what do you think? What's your reaction?
My reaction is why. I don't, and it's not even like so. Brian, I got to do the thing where I take my glasses off and I kind of rub my head because as my Twitter followers would know, I'm kind of exhausted by the Cardinals. And whether it be the new or the old regime, I'm just at the end of the end of my rope, or if it's just how bad the season has been, or having two really terrible, or not too terrible, but having the 2023 season, which was total train wreck, the 2024 season, which was slightly above average, and then this season slightly below average. If it's all these things happening at once, I don't know what it is, but I feel a great deal of fatigue towards the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, I've never been one to bash Ali Marmol. I was not really a big fan of the Brant Brown hire, but we got great results to start the season. What
What have
I
you
will
done?
say,
What have you done for me lately, Brant?
that's like that's what I don't understand. I think back to 2023, and we as fans and followers and bloviators, we like to say, "Oh, there was that moment where Tyler O'Neill was sent from third, and you might not, against Ronald Acuna, and he gets thrown out at home, and he might not have been hustling all the way. Maybe he was. Maybe he didn't think he was going to get sent. Maybe it was a good send. Maybe it was a bad send." And then Ali Marmol kind of goes and calls out Tyler O'Neill after that game. It was like the ninth game of the season or eighth, whatever it was. And it seemed like they could never get their vibe back
It's
after
still
that.
it's still being brought up today, but not in a positive manner. And you're on a great point, Kyle. And that is, I get if you're frustrated to the point you feel like you need to air this publicly, but I don't see how it's going to help anything.
Yeah, it's almost like a cry. To me, this is what it feels like. If my boss was on television, and I've only been on my new job now. Today was day one of week three, and my boss was like, "Oh, he just needs to prepare more." I would I wouldn't be upset. I'd be like, okay, you're right. I do. I've barely started. I need to know. But if I was 3 years in and I hadn't had this conversation with him, or even if I had had this conversation with him and he was telling his bosses or whoever that, yeah, Kyle, he's just, you know, he needs to take this more seriously. He needs to, then I would be infuriated. I would be like, hey, I'm right here. How about instead of telling me I need to prepare differently, tell me what I need to do to prepare differently? Those are two different things. You just change a couple words and the words become different.
I'm kind of on it from a different angle, and that is let's just take one scenario, and this is not necessarily the real reality, but let's take the scenario the Cardinals are frustrated with Jordan Walker and they're ready to cut ties. Why would you lower his trade value by telling the world the guy doesn't take his preparation to the level that you want? Why would you do that? Well,
Yeah.
how can that help? None of it makes any sense.
Yeah, and I want to give I do want to give Ali and Brandt credit because I do appreciate the candor. I do appreciate that it's not the same canned conversation. But one thing that really pisses me off a little bit about the Ali of it all, Brian, is we know from the way that went with O'Neill all of those years ago that part of that was and at least from reporting, and it didn't get into names, was that some of the veterans had expressed concerns to Ali in spring training about Tyler O'Neill's hustle level. So when it kind of manifested in the game, Ali got a chance to talk about it to the press after a game. Maybe it wasn't the most well thought out thing. And then when I go back to today,
And by
I
the
think
way, he was a young manager at the time, not making excuses for him, but he was still pretty green in that role.
that's yeah, exactly. And he's gone through that, so he should know how to handle it. But what really upsets me is it's in juxtaposition of last night. And when I say last night, I mean Monday night after Sonny Gray got absolutely murdered by the Oakland Athletics or Sacramento Athletics or the Las Vegas Athletics. Uh, the Athletics, the Philadelphia Athletics. Brian, are they still a
You read
thing?
my mind. I was like, all these people are going, who's Connie Mack? I don't know. Anyway, go on.
But last night after the game, they asked Sonny Gray if he needs to change some things, and he just kind of says yes. And then after the game, they ask Ali Marmol about like, have you guys identified what Sonny needs to do differently? And he's like, yes. And he doesn't elaborate. He's protecting Sonny Gray, and they just let Sonny Gray. And again, I understand the difference between a 12-year veteran and a 3-year veteran, but the 3-year veteran doesn't. He might get a concept of it, but that doesn't mean he doesn't feel it, and it doesn't mean
Reminds me of the Tony La Russa days where he would say, I'm not going to give my opponents a scouting report. I'm not going
that's
to
it.
give my, if I had $1 for every time I heard him say that.
Yeah, yeah, and oh my God, that's so good. So that's where I'm at. I just think it's so pointless, and it's more of a symptom of some of what has become the perceived disease of the organization, which is what we thought was gone, which was communication issues. That was one of the things that was the I guess tribal cry of the organization and the new regime, and also some latent tension that was also gone. It's remanifesting itself, and it makes you wonder if it's the same, if it's because the same people are still there, if it's because of these same people that are still there, or if it's more than that, if it's an environment harbored, I guess, harbored by the ownership or whatever, if it's just the inmates running the asylum or whatever it might be. But it's just another sign that things are not well in the Cardinals organization.
All right. So as long as we're on Kyle hot takes, there's one more piece of news that I wanted to cover this week before we close, and that is the Cardinals minor league hitting coordinator Russ Steinhorn went on social media the other day and explained that his services are not being continued by the St. Louis Cardinals, and he did the normal gracious thing of thanking everybody that he worked with, and Russ Steinhorn will end up with another job. They give him a little bit of lead time, and he'll be fine. But Steinhorn has been in the job 6 years. He was a Jeff Albert protege with Houston and came up and had led the minor league hitting function even in year one of the Serfolio regime, where they did a lot of focus on pitching performance, but they didn't put a director of hitting in place. They just kept Steinhorn and his assistant coordinator, Brock Hammett. Now, Steinhorn's gone. It'll be very interesting to see if this is the first of a number of moves that happen, sort of the next wave of changes in player development. What do you think of when you heard that Steinhorn was leaving?
I would say that my first thought was, man, that's a bummer. He's done incredible work. He came in and helped re-energize the hitting side of player development at a time when the Cardinals couldn't produce a hitting prospect, more or less a hitting prospect turned into a major leaguer to save their lives. Remember, this was draft the college pitcher, get him to the majors, and see what else you can get. Well, Russ Steinhorn and Jeff Albert, but more Russ Steinhorn, so he was given a little bit more leeway. Uh, uh, turn a lot of players, fringe players, and help turn because the players did it themselves too. But he helped turn a lot of fringe prospects into real prospects and a lot of real prospects into major league contributors. He was there. He did these things. I'm bummed out about that. Then my next thought was, hey, good for him. I'd want to get out of the organization too right now, but I'm also an emotional mess right now, Brian.
So to Kyle's hot take, which is what I didn't get to yet. Kyle was accused on X of doom posting
Yeah,
the organization when he told people that when he was asked if why don't they just hand off to Bloom now and let Mozeliak quietly ride off in the sunset. And Kyle's quote was, "It doesn't matter who's in charge of the front office for the foreseeable future," and he's right. He's
yeah,
right. Um, what's happening right now is the Cardinals are, and you can see the lack of seats. The Cardinals are in a down revenue cycle. They're not going to invest in major league free agents. They're just not going to spend the money, just like they didn't this last year. And so it's going to take time to build the farm system. And so if you're expecting something immediate, it's not going to happen because the DeWitts are still in charge and they're going to manage the franchise the way they manage the franchise, which is to try to show a profit or at least minimize the loss every year. Is that where you
yeah,
were
and
going with your thought?
that's part absolutely. I do think I think that the current player development system that the Cardinals have, the coaches, from Steinhorn to Hammett to Day, Serfolio to Pierpont, to all of them, I think that they could not have done a better job in 2025 to position the Cardinals, position the Cardinals organization for a rebirth from the draft and development side. But all that I can think about is an ownership group that is only interested in cutting money. That the report was that they were just wanting to shed Sonny Gray if he was willing, the salary of Sonny Gray, if he was willing to waive his no trade clause. It seems like that's going to be the MO as we get into the offseason too. This is an organization that is only really interested entering 2026 in the foreseeable future of shedding payroll. And then when you couple that with the comments from Bill DeWitt III, where he's constantly talking about, well, how do you get people to the stadium? One of the things that we can do is the in-game atmosphere. We can change that. The appeal of what you come down for, and none of that matters. It's all nice things to have. What matters is
What people come to do is to see fun and exciting baseball.
that's it, man. That's it. And sure, you might have one things in there to keep your kids busy. I mean, I know when I was a kid and I would roam around in the bleachers with my dad, it was nice to take $1 up and try to see how fast I could throw with the fast pitch machine. Baseball's a game designed for that kind of stuff for families to have. So to have stuff for families makes tons of sense to me. And also I get like having a DJ and being worried about having a DJ on a Friday. These are all smart things to have, but these are not things that are going to bring people down to the stadium. The only thing that's going to bring people down to the stadium is winning. And unfortunately, you're in a chicken and the egg situation where you think that if you have an egg and the egg develops into a chicken, that you've got the chicken problem figured out. But the problem is prospects don't develop into chickens, Brian. They stay eggs more often than they are chickens. And that's just the nature of how the percentage chance works out for players to become major league contributors. So whatever I'm talking about right now, I don't even know, Brian. I'm not going to lie to you.
I think what happened is the Memphis franchise needs to change their
Yes,
name back to the Memphis Chicks, and therefore then we'll have more chickens and there'll be more eggs and everybody will be happy.
we got chicks, we got chickens, we got eggs, Brian. We got Memphis. There's jazz music playing in the background everywhere. But so that's my thing is if you're not willing to supplement, you're gonna they in their minds, and they keep saying, all right, well, we're gonna do draft and develop, and then once they get to the point where we think that they're ready, we're gonna supplement it. That's when we're gonna go outside of our comfort zone and start spending money. That's gonna be too late. That's just how this thing works. When you're talking about pitching, I mean, look at how many pitching injuries the Cardinals have had in the organization this year. That's something that will repeat itself. Pardon me. You might get lucky and it might not repeat itself for 1 year, but pitching injuries repeat. That's just how it works. You have to have a stable of 9 to 13 major league starters ready to go, which does nothing for having supplemental offense in there. So
There's also this question of whether there's going to be a strike or a lockout, some type of action at the beginning of the 2027
yeah,
season. And so, the cleaner your books are, the better your position for that. And I'm not sure how high that is lists on on the priority list, but it's certainly a consideration that's happening all across baseball. I mean, we're reading for every team like the Mets that is going for it, there's three or four that are, backing off and not making those commitments either. And I'm not defending the DeWitts, but it's the game's finances are not as solid as they were, I don't think.
No, you're right. The business of baseball is good for the high end, and it seems bad for everybody else without being able to see the books. We don't know for sure because we can't see the books, but that's just how it works. And I just think that this is. It feels like when you start thinking back, when you start thinking about minor league contraction, when you start thinking about how the Cardinals had fewer and fewer minor league instructors until this year, they downsized their work group. This is something the Cardinals have been building towards. That like
Right. It took time for, I guess where you're going, it took time for it to happen, and it's going to take
yeah,
time for it to build back up. It's
yeah,
not, there's no magic fix.
yeah, and it's good.
Heim Bloom is not a miracle worker. He's a very intelligent guy. He's got a good track record, but he'll be the first to tell you he's not going to rebuild Rome overnight.
That's it. Yeah. And then maybe it's just the manifestation of Brant Brown. The what have you done for me lately? Sure, it might be something nice and new to start. It might just be something different than Mo, and maybe that's enough. With Brant Brown being something different than Turner Ward, it might just be something new, something nice. But the truth is, A, if you don't have the horses, you're not going to win the race. And B, I know all these animal
And you
analogies,
won't rule the roost.
and you won't rule the roost. Thank you, Brian, very much.
If
Jesus,
only
you
if
know,
only I named our episodes, I could call this the chicken and the egg, but I don't. I'm really boring. I put dates on them. I'm sorry, but that's the way it's going to be. Kyle,
thank goodness.
thank you again for another entertaining episode and informative as always as well.
Oh,
Next by the time next week comes around, we'll know how the season's ended for Peoria Palm Beach. We'll have pitchers of the month, and I'm sure we'll have lots of other news. I don't expect the Arizona Fall League to be in players to be announced that soon, but we'll keep an eye on that as well. As we talked about, maybe they'll do some interesting things late in the year with some of the players like the Rodriguez's and the Ortiz's who played very well this year. We don't know. With the new organization doesn't have a track record there yet, but it'll be fun to watch.
yeah. Thank you, Brian. It was a good episode. I appreciate it.
All right, Kyle. We will talk to you and everyone else on the 10th. See you then.